Thank you, Mr. Trivedi. Welcome to all of you for this inaugural session on digital democracy, accelerating the future of e-commerce. So I'd like to welcome again Ms. Goenka, Ms. Rao, Mr. Chaba, Mr. Agarwal, and Mr. Khurana. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to start off by, with your understanding, and at least how do you see the true meaning of digital democracy? What do you think should be or are the contours of what you would consider digital democracy? So if we warm up to this, let's start with Ms. Goenka. If you would like to start on, if each one of you could give your perspective on what you consider digital democracy in true sense.
For me and for us as Welspun, digital democracy is where, my blue-collar worker can operate and coexist, upskill herself or himself to that consumer in America who sees what she or he has to buy. I can just give you a perspective, with the whole advent of the home buddy economy that grew so massively. We were not traveling at all. What happened? We did a brain trust where we knew what the consumer trends were going towards health and wellness, sustainability, and those trends we caught up and created products. And that's where I call is digital democracy. It could be headless, but there's a direction. There's a trend that you can capture. For me, that's where I would talk, where it connects the world. The supply chains were a disaster. What happened there? How did it connect the containers? How could I see and I can capture where the containers were on the sea? How could I see, how could I manage my products where the consumer was looking at? I think that is democracy for me. That is where if my blue collar worker can say that, okay, I can operate the machines, I can see what my machine needs the next minute. What did consumer in America or a UK or a Europe or in India or in the hinterland of India? Because the world has just become seamless and endless. And that is what is headless democracy for me. That is the reason I think for us, I think what it has done has made the world seamless. From the consumer in USA to UK to Europe to my people, my factories in India, to our consumers in India, in the hinterland. It is not the metros we are talking about. And that is what is digital democracy for me.
Right. So seamless and connected world. Ms. Rao, your thoughts?
Thank you, Rajiv. That is a very interesting question. And I have been reflecting a bit as I hear being a home furnishing retailer, what does it mean for us? And in our context, we often talk about democratic design, right? And what we mean by that is to make sure that home furnishing is accessible for more of the many people, because it is more affordable, because it is well designed, because it meets the functionality needs of our consumers, because it meets a certain quality aspiration that people have, and in the end, it also contributes to sustainability. So this is what we call as democratic design in the home furnishing context. And if I were to extend that same argument to talk about democratization in the context of digital, I would say, what does it mean for technologies to be accessible to more of the many people, right? So we have a lot of new technologies that are coming in. Is it really mass? Can it touch the lives of everybody? And if it can, that is where I really think that we would have made some progress and some headway in terms of stating that we've actually managed to look at democratization of digital, and it is actually having a meaningful impact in terms of people's lives, in terms of enabling people's lives with technology. So that is my short take on what it means in our context, again, as a home furnishing retailer.
Chaba?
Yeah, hi. So in case of automobiles, in that context, I would say, it really opens up mind to the whole definition of mobility. The product ownership, mobility, the kind of new innovative solutions you can get with full transparency and with a track and trace mechanism, which Dipali alluded to. So the whole thing is, just imagine that, if the whole thing is about, if you think about democratizing mobility, means that all kinds of solutions can be available at an affordable cost to all kinds of people all over the place. Now, it can be from cycle to two-wheeler to four-wheeler mobility, but also it is the last mile connectivity in a very environmental friendly way. So this whole thing about the case, which is connected, autonomous, shared and electric, all this thing is moving in towards that direction. And what digitization does it is that in the utopian world, frankly, you can actually will have a lot of free time to use within the car, because then there will be a seamless integration of all the screens in the car and hands-free driving in some of the situations. And then you can be really you'll have huge time available to you for doing whatever you want to do. So that's the utopian concept, but that's possible now. And obviously it comes with lots of other issues in which, like, it's a separate issue altogether, that how do you balance the executive power to the corporate power and things like that.
Okay, Mr. Agarwal, very interesting.
Oh, fantastic. I'm loving this discussion. I think Dipali talked about blockchain, and then Kavita talked about ESG, and then Rajiv talked about what's happening in the automotive space. Right. So we at Accenture every year come up with the technology vision. And there are two of the visions that we came up with this year. There are 5 trends. 2 of them kind of resonates with what I think our panelists talked about. One is me to we, right? A multi-party system through chaos. I mean, that's what this last year has been. Everything just went online, right? People were talking about, what is this all digital? Everything went digital. Right? That's how the world changed. People were talking about these things can't be done. You need to be in the office, but we all witnessed one fine day, one switch, everybody is online. That's what we are talking about. How we are enabling our workforce, taking it to the next level and take their path to a greater future. That's the second trend, again, in our tech vision, which talks about the technologist, how you are enabling my workforce, how you are leveraging my capabilities to enable me to be a real technologist, right? So that's what we talk about as a firm as well. And that's what is happening across industries. We heard it, right? And that's what we are seeing with our clients as well. Sustainability is a big focus area. So we say sustainability is the next digital. That's what our CEO, Julie, says. And 3 or 4 years back, we said digital, every business will be digital. And that's true as well. And slowly, in next 2 to 3 years, we will definitely, the sustainability is the next digital. So that's where the future is going. Pretty excited to hear what we have said is resonating already with our panelists, all the businesses. So pretty excited.
Great, Rajul. We also have another section. We will come back to sustainability and ESG and the Internet for Environment and talk about this in detail. Mr. Khurana, can we have your initial thoughts on what does digital democracy mean to you?
For me personally, it boils down to just one word, which is access. Be it access to world-class courses of MIT, Harvard, everywhere, to everyone and everybody across the world, or it could be access to any personality over on Twitter. You can just connect with anyone, talk with them, and try to have a dialogue over there. Or it could be just access of millions of products, which Flipkart and Amazon now have more than 50 million products listed there. I remember when I was a kid, and this fancy calculator came across, and one guy was carrying it, and it had trigonometry and all of those things. And when you go to a nearby shop, you could just find just one of it, and it was very exorbitantly priced, and there were no many options. All that is gone now. Everyone has access to millions of products online, and with Lenskart also, we trying to provide easy, affordable eyewear to everyone. So I think access is the keyword for me as far as digital democracy goes.
Right. When in this whole effort to bring about digital democracy, there are always pulls and pressures at all ends of the spectrum. Businesses want free capitalism. Individuals would want privacy. Governments would want regulations, and these pressures are not easy to deal with. So, what do you think would be the right balance? What is the best way to find a balance between all of these multiple factors, multiple pulls and pressures, and all genuine. I mean, you can't have a voice against any one of them in particularly, and you can't sort of deny any of these. But the fact is that all of these need to coexist to make digital democracy, fall in place as a true democracy. So, Ms. Goenka, if you'd like to, bring about your thoughts on how does one bring about this balance between different pulls and pressures that will then bring a true democracy into the digital world.
So I'll tell you one thing, for everything, there's an upside and a downside. While the world has opened up, everything has happened. There are challenges, of course, but the opportunity is, the fact is that they've connected the world. They've connected everything together, and they've made one playing field for everybody across the globe. And I think that's the opportunity that I feel that it can. I mean, a simple example of somebody sitting in that hinterland, looking and buying and shopping, to somebody in the factory looking at, okay, how will I manage my, how will I look at and managing my machines today, to the whole world that has opened up today. The world is a stage today. So I think there are downsides, but the upsides are tremendous. The world, the way it is moving, has accelerated and has created a window of transparency. I mean, today, I'm talking about my textile company. I mean, the whole government angle, which has become digital. I mean, our duties and the drawbacks and the whole they all are digital. Everything is now transparent. And I think that's the world we are looking at. I know, if you talk about that consumer, or if you talk about the people, or if you're talking, I think the world is endless. I will give you a small example of my farmer in the field. The farmer is growing, cotton. And today he has an access to an AI app. He can see what quality of soil he needs, what quality of rain he can actually forecast. Is something that it's on his hands. And at the same time, his child is going through digital education. How empowering is that? To a consumer in America who can say that, okay, I want this product in next 20 days. How does a factory sitting in India or a China can trigger that demand, and how does that integrate? That's the power of technology. You can forecast trends. You can foresee what is going to happen. I think that's where this whole connected world is moving towards, Rajiv.
Ms. Rao, the fine balance between privacy and, let's say, regulation and free capitalism. How do we ensure that neither one of them impedes into the rights of the others, and yet we flourish as a true digital democracy?
It's a very tough question, Rajiv, and I think all of us in the midst of meeting this challenge every day today. Take the example of artificial intelligence as a technology. It works because it sits on top of a lot of data, right? And that data is coming from consumers in terms of their choices, their preferences, and so on. So where do you strike the balance between, all of us want personalization. We want something that is unique for ourselves, which meets our tastes and needs and so on. At the same time, we are also very concerned about how data related to us is actually used today. And that is where there is a constant, conflict between personalization and privacy, if I can say that. And I think most consumers today feel that their personal data is maybe not taken care of in the best fashion. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we are seeing. So for all of us, the big question is, on one end, we want to offer personalization. We want to enable consumers a lot more with digital capabilities. But where do we strike the balance between privacy as well as personalization? So if you take the example again in the context of home furnishing, today in India, we find that our consumers need a lot more support when they are designing and planning their homes. So there is a possibility for us to have an app which can actually help you with planning a room, planning a space, and so on. But if I don't know what your preferences with regard to home furnishing are? Are you somebody who has a traditional taste? Are you somebody who has a modern taste? What kind of color choices would you like? What kind of maybe sofa combinations you like if you go down into the details? If I don't know that piece of information, there is no way I can make some clear choices and recommendations for you, right? But that is also sitting on top of personal, individual data of customers. So the question in front of us is, how do we draw inferences and figure out common patterns from some of these individual data points that come from consumers, but at the same time are able to build the element of anonymity into it, so that we're still able to leverage some of the new technologies that sit on individual as well as personal data. For me, I feel that is where striking the balance today is becoming a challenge and will continue to be so for some time to come.
I think we lost her.
Yeah.
Ms. Chaba, would you like to come in? We lost you, I think, Mr. Rao, for a few seconds. Would you like to continue, or I
was just concluding, Rajiv, by saying that striking the balance between personal information as well as anonymity, and still being able to leverage digital technologies to make support consumers with individual choices. That is where I think for the foreseeable future, maybe there is going to be a bit of a challenge in terms of striking that balance.
Sure. Mr. Chaba?
I think, Rajiv, it's a very, very complicated subject. And like in society, in normal society, you have laws. Now, in digital side also, you have to have regulations, right? But it all depends on regulations. What's the intent and credibility behind those regulations? On one hand, from executive side, from the executive, which is the regulatory authority, versus what corporates are accountable for and what they need to do. There are a whole lot of questions like, when you start as an example, marketplace, but marketplace or market platforms, they start generating content and then they start curating content. And when they start curating content, it gets in some kind of a conflict with some other objectives of that firm. So they are not that much accountable, So, and then also it depends on what kind of model you need to have. You want to have absolutely libertarian, extreme left kind of thinking versus an authoritarianism kind of thinking. So how do you control these two things? And there are various kinds of models. So I would say disruption and technology is really ahead of regulations right now, but the governments all have taken note. And I think the governments also are seeing like what's happening in America versus Europe, Australia and China versus, let's say, India. And I think they're learning from each other. This whole space is evolving at a much faster pace. So the whole thing is we need to probably balance, as you said, but it's very, very difficult. It's a different subject altogether. It's a new animal we are dealing with. So how do you control the corporate accountability versus how do you really give the regulations on the government side that they don't become authoritarian and they, so that's the kind of a control. So I think this whole subject is evolving. It will take a lot of time, but the good thing is that everybody is aware of it now. Like how do you remove the toxicity of content, and things like that. So, because now in democracy is fine, but sometimes your speech is getting weaponized. Right. So when your speech is getting weaponized, your contents have become toxic. Your curations are very, very, targeted towards certain things. And how do you regulate it? So I think this is what is becoming very important.
Very interesting that, in the midst of all this, you have a new channel called the Good News Today channel.
It makes a lot of sense. And Better India types of organizations, right? Good news.
Yeah. Mr. Agarwal?
Yeah, so I mean, when you talk about privacy, I think the main thing which comes to mind is data, right? And for last, I think 2-3 years, we have been talking about data is the new oil. Some people say data is the new sunshine. We need to share it. Everything needs to flourish. But the whole point is there need to be regulation, as Rajiv said, right? Like in Europe, we have GDPR, right? Strict regulations. There is technology actually which is enabling, right? If I talk specifically of retailers, leverage data, but leverage data on the edge. That's where edge computing with 5G is coming to the picture, right? You capture the data, do the analytics on the edge, and just flush out the data. You are not storing the data on the cloud, because so it was happening. You're sending the data to the cloud, you're doing the processing there, and then sending it back for some promotions or recommendations to happen. But no more. Edge is there to help you. 5G is there to help you. So that's where I think things are moving. But if you look at from the consumer perspective, though consumer complain, I don't want to give the data. But again, if you are able to curate the data, give them personalized recommendation, as Kavita was saying, I mean, they are loving it, right? So we did a research, more than 30% customers are willing to share their data, right? If you are able to give them right recommendations, right products, they are loving it. So it's a fine balance. You need to give that confidence to your consumer, your customers, that you are not using the data in the wrong way, but you're using it to service them in the best way. You're enabling your customer experience team to give that experience with the customer. It's an experience economy, if you look at it. With everything moving online, the kind of experience that you are getting, customers are looking for even within the stores. When they walk into the store, they want the retailers to actually recognize them and give that personal greeting. Right? That's where the industry is moving. So you need to have a fine balance, use the data very diligently, ensure you're not giving into the wrong hands. I mean, there were multiple cases in the past, but there is a technology now to make it happen.
And what about the third element of that, the governance, the regulation? Yeah. How do you ensure that, you don't have a out of control FBI at your hand to,
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Ms. Khurana?
Yeah, I think the huge adoption of these digital devices platform has enabled one to aggregate a lot of data, which helps in, first creation and then adoption and discovery of a lot of content or products. So that comes in handy for a lot of users, because now that they have access to this huge, catalog, it is also important to figure out what is the one that is for me. But having said that, it should not come at the cost of the privacy. So the organizations have to take it very, very seriously and have to anonymize the data fully before they are able to use it. And I think that is where laws and things like GDPR come into play. And they have to go hand in hand with this to ensure that, my single purchase of a book doesn't really matter. But my purchase combined with millions of others is what is that matters. And, that is what should be used, not what Ramneek is buying where.
Right. Now, the bedrock of any democracy is clearly equality, and also the fact that your franchise is your own and that you are not disenfranchised at any point in time. The great threat of any of these elements running without checks and balances is that you could end up disenfranchising at least some elements of the democracy. So how do you ensure that equality on the internet, preventing wall gardens, priority access, and yet ensure that there's fairness involved? Ms. Goenka?
I think I would ask the experts to speak about it more than me, because for me, I think the equality comes in endlessly. I mean, for me, I think my equality is my consumer can actually seamlessly see, and when I can catch the trend, seamlessly shop. My equality is in the terms of my people at the factory who can actually seamlessly work towards a complete global connected supply chain. I think that's for me is equality. My perspective of equality is a woman sitting deep in the next to my factory in the communities can be empowered enough to earn her own living with the kind of initiatives that we've taken as SPUN, and a child is going to school. So I think for me, that's the equality I talk about. Equality for technology, she can seamlessly, is about equality. Actually, technology is a great leveler. Technology can give equality. Technology can have the hinterland and the metros connect together, or the worlds connect together from anywhere endlessly. And I think we've seen that in India, where the world, from the from, when you talk the desktops to people move to the mobiles as faster as anything else. And that's what you saw in India. So for me, that's my definition of equality. I think that's where I would be, talking about. And for me, I think when you talk about equality is that blue collar worker can be upgraded and upskilled to AI, connecting the machines, can act fast to that consumer, can shop what she wants to, and can have her demands to where I can track my containers through a startup where it is heading to, is what is equality. What is the world that can level to, is what I will talk about. Yeah.
So,
I think a very interesting perspective from Dipali on the topic, and maybe I can expand a little bit on it. For me, before we step into what is equality in the context of internet, maybe the bigger question is what is equality in the context of society? Because internet is not a separate planet in itself. It is often reflective of the social norms in the society that we all are part of. And I would think that if there is equality and inclusiveness in society, it is most likely reflected in terms of how we look at internet as another extension. But if it is not the case, and we're still on a journey there, which I think all of us would agree, we can see that at times the world is so polarized on so many different topics, then the question is maybe that is also getting reflected in how we interact and work in the digital world, right? So the bigger question is how are we tackling some of the questions related to equality and inclusiveness in society so that we are also able to extend it into the digital world that all of us are a part of. And that is for me a big question that is in front of us today that we need to address.
Agreed.
Chava?
See, there is a huge inequality in the world right now as we speak. There are have and have nots and all kinds of data you can get that top 1%, top 2% control 60%, 70% of the resources, power, money, or whatever, right? Now, actually, if you see in terms of even internet usage and all, so there are countries and there are pockets within any country there where you have right telecom infrastructure. You may not have the right telecom infrastructure in those locations. Your bandwidth may not be available, your data may not be available, or data may be very, pricey in certain locations. So there are inequalities in terms of even, okay, we are talking about the people where everything is available, but if you don't have even internet connection available, or the data is even pricey for them, then there is inequality of that kind. So let's assume things will improve, and as we see the example of India, within India the data is probably the cheapest in the world, right? And also the things are improving in a big way on infrastructure side. So with internet and with digital, this definitely divide will be bridged at a much faster pace, accelerated pace as we go forward. So to me, this whole democratization of data, the access information will be much faster. So this equality hopefully should be bridged and in times to come, before this age, the way it was unequal and have nots were there.
Okay, Mr. Agarwal.
Yeah, so maybe I'll give it a bit of a technology spin here, right? Probably talked about the workforce, which is actually working in the factory, right? So how can you enable that workforce to work remotely, right? So that's where the technology like digital twins comes into the picture, the IoTs of the world. You're enabling your workforce who need to be in the plant to actually work remotely. That's equality, right? Taking it to the next level, anywhere, everywhere, right? So how you are enabling your workforce to bring their own devices, right? That's what we were talking about all this while. But with this pandemic, what really happened is, bring your own environments, right? So we were okay for people to use their own environments to actually log in and do the work. So that's what equality is. Using the technology to actually enabling your people to do the work, what they want to do from anywhere, everywhere, and use the technology for mirror world, right? So that's where the industry is moving, and that's what equality is.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Khurana?
Yeah. So I think as far as the walled gardens go, right, I think the biggest currency that one has in these days is the time. So walled gardens are meant to be there. There will be someone who will end up taking the lion's share of what is of a user's time, and that will end up being the walled garden. But I think the good thing is that what we have seen is the model which was initially started by the Apple with the App Store, wherein the first iPhone didn't even have apps, and then they opened it up and then allowed a lot of creators to come in and contribute over there. I think that is the model which will prevail going forward. And with that model, one can make a walled garden, which will, I mean, essentially going to happen given the constraints on time, but at the same time allow everyone to contribute in it. And I think that is the key to ensure that walled gardens might be there, but we don't have inequality on the internet. And that is where then these companies need to be kept to a much higher standard by the authorities. Yeah.
And also, I think that's where the whole role of the regulator comes in. For instance, you didn't have interoperability in the payment apps, right? Which finally the regulator is bringing about. Now interoperability at the access of power, for instance, power generation and power distribution, interoperability for the consumer there. I think that's where also the intervention of a regulator at all points is required, where you can, even if there is a walled garden, at least there is some sense of consumer movement across different players.
Absolutely. The ability to take your phone number with you opened up.
Telecom.
A lot of,
Okay. So at the heart of all this is technology. Like Rajul was, he's mentioned technology, in fact, in every one of his comments so far, and it's so we come to that right away, essentially. So, and in fact, would be good, Rajul, if you can set the context in this. Essentially, how is it that we can leverage technology? And you did mention a few things, including computing on the edge. How do you leverage technology to ensure digital democracy and yet a free capitalism, and make sure that this doesn't, one doesn't step onto the toes of the other?
No, absolutely. I think if you look at technology, it specifically talk about AI and ML, right? Machine learning. I mean, the technology has been there for ages, right? It's just that I think we were not able to scale because there were no, now with cloud, you can scale it. You have the infrastructure, you have the bandwidth to do it. So what is really happening now is, along with the technology, you have got certain regulations as well, right? Which kind of defines the do's and don'ts, right? Again, a lot of people follow that diligently. A lot of people don't, right? I mean, we heard there was some UN cry when WhatsApp changed their certain policies, right? Everybody shifted to some other platform, right? Including me as well. So the piece is technology is there, and I talked about quite a few, right? Be it digital twins, be it blockchain, but there needs to be governance around this, which is the crux. There needs to be security layer which is very robust. With everything moving online, with everybody working from home, security is a big area which our clients are asking for help. Right? So that's the focus area. Technology is there for everything you want to do, right? But you need to use it diligently, including managing the governance aspect, the security aspects. That's where a lot of clients are asking for data governance. How do you actually secure my data? Give access to the right people. Again, you talk about democratization of data, but you need to also ensure you are giving access to the right people. Maybe just the read access to certain people and certain people who actually needs to work on that to change it. So that data governance is key, because it all starts there. Once you have sorted out your data, driving the analytics is just 10%. 80 to 90% is all around data, cleansing the data governance and everything. Analytics is quick one. Right? So that's where I think the industry is moving. As I said, technology is there, right? And technology is running the business if you look at it. All the businesses that we talk about, Airbnb, Facebook and whatnot, that's the technology which is running the business.
Yeah.
So that's where, yeah.
Mr. Chava, you are leveraging technology like nobody else. So how do you see this this whole power of technology to bring about digital democracy?
So actually, no, the power is immense as we have seen it now. So just imagine that in the car context, I'll say that connected cars, like a few years back, nobody talked about connected cars. And now we are talking about what kind of services you can add on your screen, and your car screen is the fourth screen, if I can say. You know, you have your TV screen, you have your phone screen, you have laptop screen, and then the car screen. And how do you provide how do you seamlessly integrate all the four screens so that the content what you have on other screens can be there on the car screen too, in a safe environment? You know, the safe driving is important aspect, zero tolerance on that, but whenever you are not driving, at least you can have, you know, that access. So, you know, that's one part of it. And then because of technology and now this whole electric vehicle concept, you know, that's all based on technology. You know, like you had more than 1,000 moving parts in a car, now you're less than 20, you know, or maybe less than 30 moving parts in a car. And because the software is becoming the architecture for the car now, rather than the chassis or the hard components earlier. So because of technology, this whole concept of how do you manufacture a car, how do you control the car through various softwares, and then how do you provide services in a car? So as an example, in our latest car, MG Aster, what we are launching, we are introducing the concept of car as a platform. So, you know, it means that we can have revenue stack in the car, and we can start charging money by monetizing certain services of parking or data or digital passports and stuff like that. So, you know, so this whole thing is changing. The question here, I think, is I think companies need to have, including our company, need to have a value system where we self-regulate on many things, and we need to have zero tolerance to misuse of the consumer data. So that's one. Second, we need to inform the customer very well in a very transparent way that how we are safeguarding the data, and if at all we need to share it, customer really needs to know and give a consent. And the consent is not like 3-page form, you know, 3-page thing where the customer doesn't know and straight away says accept. You know, customer really needs to know what's happening. So I think one is the self-regulation, and second is obviously the broadly government regulations, and they need to align to ensure that the consumer side is taken care of fully. So, you know, again, as I say, you know, the kind of disruptions what we are watching is immense. And even simple things like, just imagine, I'll just say, all of us probably have bought cars or will buy cars. You know, how do you buy cars? You know, you go to a dealer and then you keep waiting for his stock. Just imagine if you can just access to my stock, or even before the stock, the car is getting into a production. If you can see it on the screen and you say, okay, I need that car, you tick it, and then it gets assigned and you have track and trace, and then you can see, okay, the car is coming to you, through a dealer, obviously, because it has to be, taken care of in terms of pre-inspection. So I think this whole technology thing is changing in a big way, but there have to be lots of checks and balances by players like us and also by the government.
Ms. Goenka?
I'll take on from what Rajul said about blockchain. And I think for me, this world becomes transparent. There's two sides of the coin for sure. I think data is an enabler. It can also be the downside. But I think looking at the opportunity that we have seen in the terms of blockchain, I'll just give you a small example. We have this whole traceability to the last bale of cotton, which we call WellTrack, which is very, very internal. Going towards the next level is blockchain, where we are going to be connected to everybody, whether it's going to be the consumer, the trigger points, to the last mile, whether it's the cotton or my vendors. So I think the whole thing is a connected world that I can talk about. And that's where, we are defining a new norm of what we can do with technology and transparency. So definitely, data definitely will enable us to trigger and see the demands. At the same time, we'll also trace back and also trigger the demand with my vendor. with my partners who are all connected on that whole supply chain. It is very powerful indeed. And that's where you can also create a transparent world. I mean, with the farmers, you can enable the farmers. So I think the whole thing, I would actually connect to even to what my product, if I'm making at my textile factory, how much water has it consumed? How much green chemicals has it consumed? To how much how my people are being trained and upskilled, and so I think for me, I would look at this transparent world that gives me the equality.
Okay, Mr. Rao.
Again, lots of very interesting perspectives. For me, the way I see it is, of course, digital technologies are a very big enabler. And what is very interesting in recent times is the fact that the possibility to fuse multiple technologies that exist today. Be it analytics that is sitting on consumer data, be it AI, be it quantum computing or one of those elements, or 3D printing. The fact that we are able to fuse some of these technologies together is a very, very interesting case for us to be in. And then the question for me is, there will always be new technologies, there will always be breakthroughs that are coming in, but how does this translate into real use cases that can... So if you start to look at it as a retailer, and we would like to understand customer journeys, right? We would like to know, if somebody wants to buy a sofa, what is the first step in the process? Maybe they're going to a search engine and typing the sofa, and then there is maybe a paid search mechanism that is sitting behind it, which is then directing them somewhere. And then maybe they actually get to an IKEA website, for example. And then the journey goes on from there in terms of how the consumer is making decisions, whether to make that purchase or not, right? And in all of these processes, there is a lot of individual consumer data that is sitting with us. But the question is, are we giving people the digital freedom to make choices in terms of what data they want to share and how they want their personal data to be used? So this is one example. The other example I was talking about is, let's assume that we are able to leverage AI and visualization technologies together, for example, to design and visualize a space for a consumer in the future. Is that really going to create a breakthrough? Is that the kind of needs that consumers today have? And what kind of specific gaps in consumers' needs are we meeting through those technologies? So for me, the big one is, what kind of use cases are we able to put together where we are able to fuse multiple technologies together and then create some value for the consumer? Right? So that to me is the biggest element. Of course, as all the speakers spoke about, taking care of the privacy concerns, which seem to be coming up quite significantly in recent times. So that is where I stand in terms of how we can actually look at several of these technologies coming together and us being able to leverage it, but more in the context of democratization of technology, which we've been talking about, so that it can actually have a meaningful impact on people's lives.
Khurana?
Yeah, so I think Rajiv, the way I mean, as far as digital democracy goes and free flow of information goes, I think the way Web 1.2 started was fantastic. We had message boards all across, chat groups forming up, and everyone was able to just go and talk to anyone and discuss a lot of things. I think Web 2.0 took us to more siloed approach, where there are big organizations which get to control what is seen by everyone and decide to mute. And I think that is where what is being termed as Web 3.0, and picking up from where Dipali and Rajul were coming from, the blockchain will have the biggest impact, because if all this information is put on a blockchain, I think it is far, if done in a way, in the right way, it can be far better than trying to put as many governance or controls over databases, who has read access, who has write access, who has discovery access. All of that can potentially go away. And then you wouldn't have ability for Twitter to just delete Donald Trump's account, which should have been public record. All those tweets were hugely important, and there were there were significant things said over there, and that was just taken away. So all of that will go away, and I think the biggest technology which will have an impact on this will end up being blockchain, and that is what is being termed as 3.0, and I really think that will bring us more closer to what Web 1.0 was and what the promise of internet was.
Okay, this is such a fascinating subject, and I'm really running out of time. But if we can very quickly go through, I have two topics to discuss. One is about fairness of compensation to the creators. I mean, I said content creators, but I meant creators. Anybody from a handicraft seller to to a manufacturer to a content producer. And the second is environment. So internet for environment. So if we can one quickly run through starting with Ms. Goenka, if you'd like to start off with the creators. How do we ensure because to accelerate the future of e-commerce, which is what we are discussing, it's very important that creators get the fair compensation, and which sometimes gets kind of overwhelmed or overruled by the power of somebody else on the internet. So how does one ensure that?
I think with this whole transparent world, and I think I'll talk about again the perspective of Welspun, and where we employ 20,000 people at our factories and our communities where we are empowering women. I think for me, that woman who's earning and making a cushion or weaving a rug is equally empowered because she can operate her own digital account where that gets triggered to my blue collar worker who can operate his own account on Samay. Looking at our whole program called Disruptors, where they are my blue collar people are coming with fantastic ideas to change how manufacturing can look like, to the connected world of what blockchain is, where the farmer knows the fair practices of cotton that he's being paid by, that he's not at the ransom of the middleman. He knows what he's being paid by his child going to school, to that consumer in America who can scan a QR code and say that, okay, how much water is being used in my product? How many green chemicals are being used in my product? And what cotton is being used, whether it's fair trade. And I think that's what I would say is where this world is all about. And I think with the whole ecosystem that is being integrated, I think ESG will become a great leveler. And it is a new age technology.
Digital has actually enabled some of these creators to have access to global markets. Now, you would normally expect that a large manufacturing organization maybe has much better access because of the scale that they are able to produce things at. But what is interesting is when a small entrepreneur who is working in some corner of the world, not just in India, it could be in several other economies across the world, is actually having access to the internet and to the world market. I think that is where change of one kind is actually happening. So it is very interesting in that context for us to see that. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, more or less, yes, but it's still breaking off at times. But please go ahead.
Yeah, so that is where I feel that the biggest change is possible. As Dipali was pointing out, it is that person who's making a cushion cover or weaving a basket who's actually now able to have access to global markets because of a social entrepreneurship person, which is actually enabled through technology. So I feel that is a very good example where there is a lot more fairness of compensation to the creator of anything, right? As compared to maybe if you go back and look at 20 years ago versus today, that is the big change and big enablement that has come in because of digital technologies, I would say.
Okay. Ms. Chaba, we've been on panels together. I know you're doing a lot of work in that area. Would be good to hear your thoughts.
So actually, I'll talk about that. On one hand, we have very mainstream kind of vendor base, and they have been supplying components since ages. And there is a certain rules there, and so they know how to play that game, and that's happening. But in this particular context, I would say there are new players now. And like digital content creation is happening in a big way, and so there actually it's all depend, in my opinion, about the value what they bring to the table. and also certain anti-discrimination kind of things what we need to keep in place to ensure there's equality, you know. But also one thing is very interesting, Rajiv, here is that incubation of and hand-holding of some of these producers, you know, and in the car context, you know, what's happening is that then when we give some of these startups an access to the car platform where they can create more avenues and services, as I was talking about earlier, then I think it becomes very important that we really handhold them and incubate them. So we need to invest a lot in that kind of a process to ensure that they are able to generate good quality content for us. And also the compensation, frankly, in our context is based on the value what they create. So there is no, and we don't have any discrimination. Your question actually is in respect to lots of big platform companies where they have thousands of vendors and like the kind of practices they have in terms of compensation. So frankly, I can try to answer that, but frankly, that's not my area. Right?
Sure. Yeah, Mr. Agarwal, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So no, I think Rajiv, you talked about car as a platform. Another quick idea: car as a revenue generator for an individual, right? With autonomous car coming, if you're out of station, your car can earn money for you, right? So that's how you should maybe look at it in future. Coming back to the topic, right? So I mean, with live streaming, what really happened, right? The farmers sitting. I mean, we all saw those videos coming from China, right? Farmers sitting remotely, they are coming online with web streaming and able to sell their products.
Yeah.
That's what fair compensation is, right? They are getting the fair amount of the money that product should have got. Again, if you tie up with what other platform, again, I will come back to blockchain, right? So all these content creators, they are able to actually see who is using their content and they are getting paid accordingly, right? So I mean, technology is enabling fair compensation if you look at it. But again, you need to use the technology in the right way. I keep saying that again and again. But that's where it's moving, I think. And then ESG is definitely a big thing.
Yes.
Will again result in fair compensation for the actual workers as well, because that's the kind of reporting every organization need to do, whether they are paying their workforce according to what they ideally should be getting paid, right? So that's a big piece which is coming. And how do you report it? How do you define your reporting? It's not easy to understand that. GHG, GRI, SESB, all these reporting, it's not easy to understand. So that's what we as a firm are working on, to simplify it for our clients, make it easy for them to understand what really goes in. There is some frameworks and platforms that we are working. So interesting things happening in this space, and definitely more to come.
Okay, Mr. Khurana.
Yeah. So Rajiv, I think as far as compensation for content creator goes, or creators of all sorts, be it content, be it small snippets of code, or be it small little products, I think the biggest barrier for that has always been two things. First is a way to enable digital payments, because for doing a small transaction, taking out the card, CVV number, and then putting in an OTP has always been a pain. And more importantly, enabling small payments, which is in lower numbers. So I think what we all should be proud of over here is that the way UPI rollout has happened in India has really unlocked quite a lot. Because if you look at any of other digital payment penetration, UPI is really heavily penetrated, and it allows you to quickly and effortlessly make smaller payments to any of the content creators, or small product creators, or maybe a creator of a small image and GIF across the internet. So I think what you will see happening going forward is that a lot of these creators will be taking direct payments using these tools which now have been enabled. And I think that is what will unlock fair compensation for a lot of creators.
Okay. We have completely run out of time. I believe we are 2 minutes beyond, but I just had one more discussion point on environment. Akash just wanted to check whether we can do a quick 2-3 minutes, or we are totally out of time. Okay. So the last topic is about the internet for the environment, and if we can quickly go through this to try and understand, how do you fight waste? How do you ensure that we are energy efficient on the net, achieving international climate goals, environment, sustainability, all of that? How does one ensure that these are all an integral part of digital democracy? Ms. Goenka? You're on mute, ma'am.
I think that's the most important one that I feel, and for us at textiles, where after oil, we are the biggest polluter. So I think for us to measure how much water are we using, how much cotton are we using, whether we are having sustainable cotton, to our whole supply chain, how does that work? I think that's going to be something that we have to measure and have a visibility to create a supply chain which is completely transparent. So I think with the data that is transparent, the data that can connect, the data that is visible, and looking at the governance, sustainable, and environment. I think environment, connecting our machines together so that we know how much water and steam is being consumed. So we have all our machines connected on one platform. So the speed to react is faster. In cut and sew, if we can see that how we can have different, it's not just it's just not the women. We have around 30%, 27 to 30% women workforce that is working with us, especially able people who are working with us. How does that connect together so that the communities are empowered enough? And how are our vendors connected to the whole supply chain? I think so. The whole idea of the whole manufacturing, how much water are we using? For example, at Welspun, we recycle around 30 million liters of water, and not a drop of fresh water is used because the farmers are getting water for their irrigation, and there's drinkable water for the communities. So I think ESG is going to be a way forward, and data which is going to support that, where we can have an integrated supply chain through blockchain, visible, transparent world from the consumer. I think for COVID changed it all. Consumers are looking at sustainable things, looking at how that environment gets impacted in a positive way. They are looking at that whole transparency. And I think that's what data is going to do. And that's what the whole environment is going to do. So looking, how much water, how much gas, how much steam, how much power, how many people, how are you working with that whole ethical supply chain? I think that's where I will look at. And with QR codes and blockchain, I think we can have a complete transparent supply chain visible as well.
Now, very quick.
I could build on what Dipali was talking about. And for me, when I think about environment and sustainability, I feel there are three important elements that we can look at in terms of how technology, digital, and data can be applied. First one, and the biggest one for me, is how are we impacting consumers? How are we impacting lots and lots of people to take meaningful steps towards sustainability? Because at the end of the day, a few enterprises can talk about it, but if we don't create a movement where millions of consumers are involved, there is no way we can bring about change. And that is where I think digital can play a very, very important role. One of the most important things is supporting people with information on how they can lead more sustainable lives at home, right? So for example, are you storing food? Are you using taps that consume less water? Because these are things that we are doing every single day, right? And even a small difference and a small change in some of these habits can have a significant impact on the environment. So the first one for me is a consumer standpoint and how are we enabling consumers in context. The second one for me is all enterprises that have large operations, be it manufacturing, retailing. I think they have a big role to play in terms of how they are managing and optimizing their day-to-day operations. For us at IKEA, we of course are integrated in many ways, starting with forests, starting with manufacturing, starting with containers that are sailing across the ocean, and then finally the retail format. Right. And large retail formats is that. And the big question there is, how are we looking at energy efficiency? How are we looking at a carbon footprint? How are we looking at waste management? All of these different things, again, can be very well enabled using technology. And there again, I think we have a very big role to play. For example, again, it is a mix of multiple technologies. For example, solar panels on top of every store. It needs a certain percentage of the energy need of a typical IKEA store, right? And that is, again, a meaningful contribution in terms of how we are achieving energy efficiency in that context. And for me, the third important thing is more around how do we bring communities together leveraging technology. The classic example is one was social entrepreneurship. But there can be so many other ways where we can bring people together on common topics related to the environment and related to sustainability and really help build a movement towards it. So I feel these are the three important areas where technology and digital can actually be a big enabler to move towards and move in the right direction when it comes to sustainability and a better environment for all of us.
Okay. Okay. We have totally out of time, I believe, but we can quickly run through these. I'm sorry to hurry, Mr. Chava.
Yeah, I think I'll be brief. So this whole environmental and sustainable issues are being driven by global climatic carbon neutrality targets by 2050, rightly so. And I think it's imperative for all of us, individuals, as companies, government, to be really serious about the whole thing. So coming to the auto market, and that's why electrification of the whole thing is happening in that direction, where the government also is pushing. I think we can do much faster. Consumers are ready to adopt. They need to be given the options. But again, within electrification, there's a whole lot of thoughts about it's well to wheel kind of a thing. So from where you are getting the energy, how the battery is made, what's the battery life cycle management, and things like that becomes very, very important. It's not just the emissions coming out of the vehicle. So that's why we need to look at the whole supply chain, where I think for every industry, I think which needs to be based on the circular economy and sustainability.
Okay. Sagarwal?
Yeah, so just a quick one again, technology, right? So when we talk about sustainability, everybody talks about move your data center to the cloud, but it's not that easy, right?
Easier said than done. Yeah,
you are moving it to the cloud, which is running on renewable energy. You need to look at your infrastructure footprint. That's where we have come up with a platform or accelerator called MineF, which helps our client to actually choose which cloud platform you should go for. Right? So that's one. And there are multiple other use cases. If you talk about fashion, I think cutting is a big thing, right? So minimize the waste. Can you use AI ML to do that cutting for you? Right? Can you use AI ML to do the design for you? Can you use AI ML to make the products for you without actually making the physical products? Can you use AI ML to create the 3D models? Can you use the technology to actually have those senses of smell generated for those products before you actually manufacture them? Because that's very sustainable. You're not manufacturing 100 units, but you are creating that digitally, giving that smell sense. And then you will, I think we have a session planned of those demos from us, which we have created with some of our clients. So yeah, lots happening in the sustainability space.
Khurana?
Yeah, I think what Kavita said is absolutely correct in this, that real meaningful change will come with a lot of consumer adoption. And I think to get the mass adoption, we really have to build products which are meaningfully different and better, and not just using renewable technology. The Tesla did well, and now Ola Electric seems to be doing well, not because it is only electric, but the mass adoption is because it is saying 0 to 40 in 3 seconds and 180 kilometer plus range. So it is meaningfully better scooter for anyone to buy in, and not just for people who are looking for sustainability. So I think onus is on us to build better products and which are also sustainable. Yeah.
Well, great. This is a topic that we can go on and on. It's such a vast area and some of the most fascinating discussion today. Thank you, Ms. Goenka, Ms. Rao, Mr. Chava, Mr. Agarwal, and Mr. Khurana. Thanks for sparing the time for this panel.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us here.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.